Okay, so we're gonna continue our work on the budget adjustment, and we have Brady Nixon here who is the responsible for the document that we have ahead of us, as well as this one-page summary. And I think 1, 2, and 3, that was striking the capital appropriations language, and we were concurring with the House on that language. In spite of the eloquent argument presented by the commissioner.
The fourth House change is striking out a proposed one-time
No, we need
appropriation.
to hold that. We haven't made a decision on that.
The fifth proposed change is striking out, is related to striking out the capital appropriations amendments. The sixth and seventh are related to removing proposed changes to the after-school and summer learning.
We have to hold that. We seem to have a lot of confusion as to what we're doing here and why we're doing it. We at this point, I think our education committee is going to be taking some testimony. I think health and welfare will be taking testimony, and I think judiciary might be taking testimony, since the funding for those programs came from the sales tax, that new revenue from the sale of cannabis. And so when that bill was passed, those funds were specifically allocated to support these programs. And they are programs, and I know Senator Lyons have certainly had testimony. Senator Sears was talking about, and they were designed to be prevention in nature, having kids after the end of the school day, having a place to go where they're secure, where they're supervised, where they have activities, and a place that they would want to go. And so there's a real good evidence base on that, but there seems to be, because of the need to deal with the fact that all the cannabis tax revenue ended up in the ed fund, it has raised a host of questions and concerns. And so what some people thought would be fairly straightforward has raised a lot of questions. Senator Lyons.
Right, so last night I took some time to go back and look at the development and evolution of the after-school programs. And it's very clear that they're out-of-school programs, important for those hours, 3 to 6, when kids are most at risk for risky behaviors. While the programs might be held in schools, they are meant to be, it's a program that's meant to be a community environment with public, private, and independent organizations working with kids for trauma-informed prevention programs. The testimony that we had in our committee, and I'm going to do this in my committee as well, but we heard from folks from Chile, Iceland, Finland, and our after-school program to build community services at the neighborhood level. And in Finland, it's had huge effect. And Iceland, it's had huge effect. In Chile, it's had huge effect. So the program development is, in some ways, it's pretty young. It's critically important, and we deliberately established it as being a separate program from curriculum and in school. It's a program for creative responses to children's needs. So that's really very clear. And it was also a deliberate decision to keep the funding separate, just so that there's a way of tracking those the activities that are going on.
And not overspending either.
And not overspending, of course, so there's a lot of work that's happened on this in the past. I would hate to see it become homogenized.
Well, I think that's why it's important that the committees that really dealt with this, when we were considering the cannabis bill, which was controversial, and it was money for prevention on the excise tax as well. So it was very carefully thought through, but sometimes that history needs to be sort of brought back.
And started, right, 2014, 2017, 2019. There's a continuous progress towards what we currently support.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna keep going then.
The original pilot is, that thing was in.
Yeah. So we have a lot of history here that seems to be, and the reason, certainly some of the communications that we've been getting from individuals seem to be defining it as an education program. And it unfortunately, because it was the sales tax revenue stream, but we have other revenue streams that are allocated across different uses. And the example is purchase and use. Some goes into, a third goes into the education fund, but 2/3 goes into the T fund. We also have the same with rooms and meals. Revenues, 25% goes into the ed fund and the other balance goes into the general fund. So it's not uncommon that we allocate revenues across multiple programs and multiple funds. So this is unfortunately got caught up with the fact that we repealed some language, notwithstanding language that would have allowed these payments to have been made, even though the revenues got put into the ed fund. So we'll have a lot of discussion, I guess, within the policy committees to, otherwise it seems like there's a lot of revisionist history here, or at this point, there's a desire to redefine what the money's for. And Senator Birchlick was on the after-school study committee and
Task.
task force, I'm sorry, task force. So, and I know you,
We're not, can't do study committee.
no, task
Task.
So in your time's not worth much. So I'm gonna keep going here. Section AOT, this is switching money around where, it wasn't being used for,
And I would note, in the administration's technical letter, they address the construct issues for this section here.
they did.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And what does that mean for you?
It was the administration's belief, that the Milo Smart adjustment couldn't occur in this section. They've since realized that it can, but they still have a change to the construct offered by the House.
The administration did $1 million change, the House did 500,000. I don't know if we wanted in transportation just to take it up.
Yeah, why don't we hold that? Section 62, we've already done that enough for right now.
The remaining three are related to after school.
Okay. And the use of the cannabis sales tax. And, okay, so we've got, through that, now we'll keep going, to the bottom of page 20. And we've had some discussion, that's the 10, first is the 10 million to the municipalities. We've had some conversation about that, but we've come to no conclusion. That's something the House added, and we'll hold that for now.
The next change is on page 22. This is adding $166,000 general fund for a grant to the Howard Center for its cultural.
And that is definitely a hold. That's a new, it's a program that got started with the CDC grant. They have a team, but I think we're gonna have to look at that in the context of the 25 priority setting.
The next change is on page 24.
What about the top here?
105.
23.
That is not an addition. It was for the purpose of drafting, just to make sure that the construct adding the 166,000 general fund was drafted correctly.
Oh, so all of that goes, 1 and 2 are all part of that. Okay.
Right. And you'll see that a couple other places in the 1100 amendment.
But We are number two. That's not new.
It's not new. So in the 1100 section of Act 78, if a department or agency only received a single appropriation, the construct was drafted differently. So this addition of the Howard Center necessitates the addition of a sub two, sub one.
Okay, so we're really not changing it. And once we do something with the, whether we,
The only actual change is the 166,000. On page 24.
that's a whole, that's a new program. They asked for funding last year in the budget, and it was one of the many requests that we could not fund when we did the budget, and the same would be true. I've asked anything related to housing, the Senator Rom Hinsdale, they have a review.
That is all story.
So those are new
4 and
additions,
5.
4 and 5.
Page 25,
And just to go back, remember yesterday, the discussion, we are dealing with some lesser money than, for example, the nursing home, the emergency relief. The argument, I mean, the testimony they got was that the 17 million was absolutely necessary based on even past experience of 18 million. And the House reduced it to 14, and that we couldn't really calculate how that 14 was arrived at. We subsequently have gotten communication that by obviously the lobbyists representing the industry think it's going to be more like 20 million.
Yeah.
So we obviously are going to have to make some reductions because that 3 million in the House passed DIA, they've spent in other ways. And if in fact it is needed, and the 17 million that was requested by the administration, it's what we actually need to pay those nursing homes, which are in a very, very difficult situation and serve very, very vulnerable populations. We're gonna have to keep that 17 in if we come to that conclusion.
I just, quite frankly, I think the 17 will be lucky if we don't run over that.
Well, that was the letter suggesting it was 20, probably gonna come in more like 20.
Well, last year they spent 18.
Yeah.
Something.
All right, so we are going to keep going. This, on page 25, we did a one-time of 3 million. The food bank obviously would like more. They would like 3 million in their base. That's the request that they've submitted to us for the 25 budget. So at this point, we want to make a decision, we'll hold this one as well until we,
Did we increase the days last time around?
no, it's all been one time. It's all been one time.
Oh,
There's a small amount in the base that's been there historically. It started out, I think, about 85,000 was to help underwrite the cost of delivering food to the food bank, out to the food shelf.
Oh, I'm thinking of last time, Meals on Wheels.
We did increase the base
Yeah.
by $1 million,
Yeah, I know.
And that's in.
but the House added on there one time another $1 million. But that was a base increase.
Mhm.
All right, so on page 26, we're just gonna, at this point, I think we just need to look at housing all as a package, and so we will close that out.
and to clarify for the committee, that's the House addition of 5 million there. So Governor recommend was 5 million less than what's offered here.
Well, the House, that governor had the 8, 2, and the 4.
That is 13.
But the 4 was for emergency shelter and the other was for
Through
emergency housing. Through,
April 1st.
well, I think we've been bringing this up, and I heard that testimony has been offered by DCF, and it wasn't clear to me that, the facility in Waterbury where that they're only talking about operating. Well, I heard that from, Representative Wood, who lives in Waterbury, that the plan is not to operate the facility after June 30th.
I couldn't.
Why would we buy it and fit it up? we won't even have it fit up before we're shutting it down.
And the testimony we had was basically a pitch, a sales pitch, that this would be a shelter.
Which we are gonna need for quite a while, right? Because we are gonna have a sufficient,
And then supposedly after that 3 months, it's to store equipment, which is, doesn't seem to be the top.
But we didn't hear that testimony at all.
No, Senator Starr,
I heard, but I heard from Representative Wood this morning
Yeah.
when we had our meeting that it was only through June 30th.
no,
And there's no funding in the 25 budget.
I'd like to ask,
Well, we have the commissioner writing back.
and that would be great to have additional testimony on that.
I think we do
Well,
need it.
before we spend that money,
Well, I mean,
It may still be a good purchase, but I have to say, I may have missed it, but my impression was that that was gonna help us add temporary beds on an ongoing basis
Yeah.
as alternatives to motel rooms.
and I'm wondering if, it's hard to know, but we had testimony that seemed to go one way, then there was some community reaction. And suddenly the response to the community was that it was only gonna be there for 3 months. I don't know that there was one plan that was consistent throughout, or whether it changed, but it certainly was not anything that we heard.
no, we have that tape,
Yeah.
so we could, certainly listen to that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I see, Adam is, you, wanna put yourself on record and respond, or do you wanna give us, maybe at some point, understanding the communication and the information that got, get some clarity to us, because it does obviously put, the proposal to acquire this property, in a very different light than what we thought we were,
Would you guys like to speak to Commissioner Winters?
he's the one who testified.
Yeah,
Would you like to speak to him again? I mean, it seems like there were some answers that weren't provided.
I think so.
Project.
But I guess you would have some knowledge, would you not? I mean, Secretary Clauser came in here in support, so I assumed that it had been vetted.
It has.
Yes, well, we're not making a decision and we need more information. In light of what, has been, suggested here.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
so what does that include? The money that we're looking at, what sections, is it the 13 million? Or is it the 4 million, or is it the 4 million where we already have
Separate.
No, it's separate from any of that.
totally separate?
It's the acquisition of the armory and the purpose.
But we did hear that it was gonna come out of that 4 million, that's what I thought, so I didn't know whether we were tagging that one
I
again.
don't think it was coming out,
Was it coming out?
I thought there was an additional.
We're just holding until we
Okay,
get more
we're-
information, because I think we're kind of at sea here.
900 and some thousand.
890.
896.
Yeah.
A bit of could be from the 4 million.
I think.
Okay.
All right, so now page 27. The 300,000 general fund, for Essex County, renovation, that was something that actually I spoke to, Representative Lanford. They had some money from the HVAC that they didn't, need, and it was to repurpose, something else they needed for the courthouse. The court administrator's office supported this, so it's just allowing the money to be used, in a different way.
And for the committee's awareness, the administration had intended to include this in the budget adjustment. And then included it in the FY 25 budget proposal. So, this was inserted by the House Appropriations Committee and will be removed by them in the budget.
That's how
So that's good.
yeah, that's why I talked to Representative Lanford about, because people were getting nervous that somehow it had fallen through the cracks. And the rest are just renumbering.
Yes,
Okay. Now, down the bottom of 27, that's the $1 million for the
Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels. And we have not made any decisions about this additional.
I favor it. If people don't feel comfortable putting it out.
I think we're not, I just wanted to hold it relative to others. The issue ultimately is, this is one-time money. So it's,
Out of the
it's,
25 or 29 carried forward, isn't it?
I don't know, either they're gonna cook an awful lot of meals between now and June 30th, or they're gonna carry something forward, but, it's because it's an additional request. And on top of $1 million base increase, which, looking at the 25 budget, we're not gonna be able to increase the base, so I think we'll just have to look at it, see how our bottom line is. Okay. On page 28, they, ABE asked for 1.5 million last year. We were looking at the level of funding, from the education fund for the students that are served by ABE. Saw a continuous downward trend. Senator Westman has been looking at it. So what the budget adjustment did was, the opportunity to come back and say, well, we asked for 1.5, you gave us $1 million, so now we'd like the other 500. And, I'm gonna just put that on hold as
Yeah,
well
I
for
put it
now.
on hold. They're supposed to get back with me with more information. The,
And it's one time.
you're right, they're supposed to get back with me with more information by tomorrow morning, and, they did do that study, and I think there were many of us that hoped that that study would address the funding issue, and, really, it didn't. It came up with a new formula in the way money would go out to, the for adult basic education, but it didn't really deal with where the money come from. And the backdrop is that starting in 2016, AOE changed the regulations around how they applied to get it. And they tightened up on what would be, ed fund. And so there has been a drop off in ed fund participation in this since 2016, which has created that hole. And, I have asked that they, the adult basic education people highlight what those changes were, so this committee.
The question ultimately becomes this is one time, and it's a bridge to nowhere, to exactly, what is gonna happen here, so, we will hold it, I think, obviously, seeing some things come back in the form of, we didn't get it when we got the big bill, so we're gonna try to get it in the budget adjustment. And possible, I wanna change this language on the organic farm, where I need to talk to Michael Grady, Senator Starr and I talked about, this is a new pot of money, and we wanna make sure that the parameters around who gets the money is very clearly for farms that are in operation when we're putting this money in, which is when this bill is, passed.
Am I remembering right that there were 4?
Yeah. And there's actually 4 in part of another. You know, only got partial one, but we need to work.
We think that we can reduce this a little bit because one of, by the time the money ran out, one of the farms is no longer in operation. So the whole point of the money was to keep these farms in operation. So
Are you all talking about the delta between the two or the totals 79?
No,
I'm talking all about the 254 being brought down to about 100.
so,
Right, that.
Yeah,
let's say,
the difference too.
Yes.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, it'll be a lesser amount. We're about 100,000.
unless you want to raise it.
Bobby, you're always thinking. Okay, shall we
Well,
keep going?
right.
The next 3 changes are, adding funds to 3, Act 47 programs. So S-100 programs that were.
And I've asked our chair of our housing committee, because we did in some of these contingent appropriations, but in talking with the chair, there obviously housing is a top priority. And this is an opportunity to kind of revisit, is knowing where we are now and what we need. Would you still want to move forward in this particular way? So I haven't had a chance to talk with
We had over $8 million.
or it's a lot of money. Some of it is, this part is related to Act 47. That was S-100 that came out of here. And there were several contingent appropriations. And so this is, going back and saying, well, let's fund those contingent appropriations with the revenue upgrade. But I think our housing committee will want to look at that and just validate that with the benefit of experience and the discussions that we're having today, would you want to revisit any of that?
The other two split, 9 million, between VHFA or grant to VHFA and, 4.5 million to, VHCP.
And F was part of Act 47. And that's
on
one,
page 31.
and that has to do with the missing middle. And so that's part of what I've asked, and then, which is over and above what we did in housing, G is to just, put more money into VHCB, which is, at a minimum, I would say it's a 25 discussion at this point. And it wasn't part of Act 47. We did put more money into VHCB, and we did a lot with housing. But this is, and I've asked, they should take a look at that.
The next page is to section 43. This adds language to Act 78, the 1104.
Can I ask a question back on, number 2, section 41 on page 32? And there's a list of, how that money might be used. Should, this is question, I don't know the answer to, should, shelters be included in that list? So this is mixed income, rental housing, home ownership. Yeah, shelters don't fall there, take it back.
Down at the bottom on
so-
19,
It's
it's
on the,
expansion of shelter capacity. What page?
Yep.
So on page 31,
page 31.
the VHCB appropriation last year was split. So 10 million was dedicated to enhancing the shelter capacity there, and the remainder of the appropriation and sub 2 was dedicated to those other purposes.
Okay, so it is, okay.
Once again, that's 4.5 million. And, that we're putting all of them, so we got further discussion and what we have to work with within our bottom line. Okay, section 33 is the language that we have already discussed, and that has to do with the cost of living adjustment for teachers, and it came to light that the language that was put in 2016 that capped the COLA at 5%, which had never been an issue since then until we hit inflation of over 7%. So what we did was a one-time payment last year for the difference, and then we made a commitment that we would change the policy and remove that 5%. But from an actuarial perspective, we have to fund that policy change because there is the possibility that inflation could exceed that 5%, which the actuaries had been using in calculating the R. So we had last year we appropriated 3 million to be that one-time payment, and we set aside money in the reserve to fund the policy change. this is fulfilling that commitment. And so it's taking and unreserving the money in the ed fund, adding a little bit to it, because we didn't use all 3 million. And it is fulfilling, that commitment that we made with the teachers.
So for clarity, there are multiple sections involved in this policy change that Senator Kittrell is addressing. This particular section, there's a pot of, I believe, $160,000.
Yeah.
So this language change allows for $160,000 of that.
Go toward the reserve amount. And then we still had to add a little bit more.
Right.
So that when you have that language and to fund the present value, blah, 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 that's just allows you, if there is remaining money in 3 million, that you could use it for that.
Correct. So this is just language to say you can use that $160,000 that's left over.
So that's fine, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're gonna see a little bit more, I guess.
The
Because
next,
we have to unreserve what we reserved and add a little bit.
right. The next changes are on page 36. The bulk of these changes are technical corrections, so there's an error in citation last year in Act 78. So there are changes addressing the internal contradictions there. In sub 4 on page 37, this is language recommended by the House Committee on Government Operations and accepted by the House Appropriations Committee, correcting or adding additional language in order to extract the greatest value from limited state and federal dollars. Is the intent of the General Assembly that all such funding is expended in an efficient and complementary manner. And on page 30, there was additional language put forward as an amendment on the floor when the House took this up to make sure that any federal grants wouldn't be messed up essentially by the language that was there before that had stricter oversight language.
And this is language, some people, there's one individual in particular who has raised questions about the language or doesn't feel that it's adequate. Senator Cummings is taking testimony, getting an update to see whether we need to, she would recommend any changes in terms of what the House did. This is something Rep. Harrison, I think, we worked out.
Yeah, and on this section 11 million. And the 11 million for the regional dispatch. And I thought they were going to do away with that or something.
This is to replace the system, the emergency dispatch system. So there was 9 million in a COPS grant that public safety had, but then we were looking at E911 and doing a combined plan. And actually, I think that we had legislation that was passed by GovOps last year with the director of 911's Army working with Jen Morrison to put together the plan to develop this new system.
I don't know where I heard it, but I thought I heard they were, they centralized everything from back.
Are you talking about the consolidation of the PSAPs, maybe?
Yeah, isn't that what this is?
No, this is the whole communication system and the calls that come in and how they're managed. It's not the staffing and it's not the sites. Remember, we had that battle around the PSAPs and consolidating,
Yeah,
and then was gonna save staff, and then it turned out not to save staff, but this is the telecommunications that are necessary to support when you make a call, to make sure it gets answered and responded to.
so
This is
this is for
And will support,
state police themselves.
yes, emergency dispatch, but it is, yeah.
Section 49 is related to section 48. So this just allows for the task force to continue using the funding they did not use the funding for pilot projects in calendar year 2023. So there's just striking language to make sure that they still have access to those funds.
Is that the additional money, like was 2 million and that the 1 million could be released by joint fiscal, is that the?
Right.
And I do know that it's like Mary Arroyo, I'll work closely with House.
And finance is gonna take it up.
Yes, that and requests. So,
The next change is on page 52.
page 52?
Yep.
I'm only on 39,
Yeah, me too.
not anymore.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm jumping here.
Okay.
About 38, we did that.
What's all the yellow? Remind me what yellow means.
Yellow is just, it's actually just, for me, really, it's so that I know to take out the explanations when I'm cleaning up the bill.
Okay.
52.
52, now we're down to cannabis and this is the positions that they requested.
You think, Brady, you skip over something, all those pages?
We gotta trust.
There are a lot of controversial things that I don't want to be looking at, so they saw in those pages.
You can read them tonight, Senator Star. They're just really technical and they aren't anything very substantive, I think is, but sometimes they can fool you. Page 52, remember we had the testimony that they needed the 2 compliance officers.
Yeah.
And at that point, we've agreed that we would honor that request. Yeah.
Section 56 is related to the ERP, which I believe Senator Kitchell said is on hold for now. As is section 57 and section 58.
I think maybe we want, I think the request is perhaps to keep that language, but I'll confirm that in section 57. I think that was the request that we had is hold on the 3 million, but make that change. What is happening is we've set money aside for these new IT replacement systems, but never funded the staff requirements to do the business plan and the design that have to precede and really determine what you're gonna to develop the specifications for whatever software or whatever you're putting out to bid. So we've only done the funding for the back end and not the upfront work. And the other thing is departments have to reassign their most knowledgeable staff to work on the project. And like in DMV, we've had to backfill positions because that staff has been reassigned to the IT. And I'm happy to report, and Senator Burchett, we talked about it, the whole fee adjustments that we made were implemented without a hitch. So that was good. And the T fund is very anemic. You want to remember the T fund actually experienced a downgrade.
Yeah.
From the July 4th pass.
That's why they haven't been solving their own filing problem.
No, they don't want to rush your car, Bobby. I think that's it, don't you?
No, I don't think so.
I think you must have a special on car washing because your car, for Vermont car, is very,
I bet he paid for the undercoat too.
It's because he has that front parking spot. It's gotta look good, everybody.
When you
yeah, it looks
when you
pristine.
pay for those expensive cars,
Just have a car wash.
you want to keep it.
I have never even cleaned my car since I bought it in 2010. It is just, I mean,
Just,
not a help
you
valve.
just got it re-inspected, so you got it for another
That's
year.
right.
I get the Department of Health in there. It's not so cheap.
We don't want people who are cleaning their cars.
If you're gonna,
You're spending money on detailing and,
if you're gonna run your car as long as you run yours, the heck with it. But when you trade them every 3 or 4 years, you wanna keep them looking good.
Well,
Cause I'm gonna get a good trade-in value if I trade.
and mine is gonna have to be targeted.
They're gonna pay them to take it.
Right.
That did happen.
So, The question is, do we want to add the fact that, permissible use of this fund could be to,
The ERP.
yes, on section 57. And that's the technology modernization to allow, the funding. So we can do the upfront work to get to the IT system itself. So,
So you have, look over there.
yeah, we'll do that, but we're not freeing up the 3 million. Yeah.
Not 56 or 57.
So
Yeah, okay.
And section 58 is related to that and also both. Section 60 and 61 are treasurer studies. Both are in collaboration with the Department of Finance and Management and the Joint Fiscal Office. One relates to fiscal reserve practices and the other relates to fiscal stress testing.
All right, we've had some discussion in the joint fiscal about stress testing budget, really understanding that, so this language was developed by
The Joint Fiscal Office.
joint fiscal office.
So the treasurer's gonna do
Well, the treasurer obviously connects because the reserves are so important to our
But the joint fiscal office is okay with doing this work?
yeah,
They just receive it.
Yeah.
They don't have to do
they
it. I guess they have to do the work of receiving. They have to read the report.
So this report does not because we're trying to be very conscious about the workload that we're imposing on joint fiscal, but this is something joint fiscal is recommending we do. And I think some of the best practices for state fiscal management systems recommend stress
what is
testing.
that on line 22? On page 54.
54,
Yeah, line 22 at the bottom.
Fiscal practices.
State
fiscal reserve
practices.
Practices of other states.
yeah, it has to do with what states have for reserves and what is recommended. Ours are around 13-14% right now.
Is that total of all the different?
All the funds, yeah.
But why,
The intent of the language here is to include a study report, examination of the fiscal reserve practices of other states, so that when the treasurer makes, the treasurer's office makes their recommendations in the report, they may, for instance, say, well, Michigan does this, and that's really smart.
And should it be 5% statutory reserve for the transportation fund, or should it be, I don't know, 6, or should it be, I think like Montana, they have budgeting practice, so any forecast, they only spend up to 95% of the forecast and they book the rest, or it's an incredible amount of money that they've got. I'm sure their forecasting must include quite a line for interest income or investment income. But, so this is something that we've had some conversations with the joint fiscal staff, and they recommend that Vermont.
so that's good, it's go.
So I think we should,
Okay.
and this was developed by joint fiscal staff. We want to respect their recommendations to us in terms of taking a look. And I think this came up obviously because if we agree with the administration to do a transfer rather than appropriation, we've actually reduced our reserve, and this kind of takes a look at what is making sure we are prudent in those decisions.
Or would we expect to see it? Request in the treasury budget to do this thing? Or is it something that they do, or do they hire a consultant?
They haven't asked for that they need money.
Yes, to my knowledge, there is not a request for an outside contract. This would be internal work with current staff. On page 56, section 62, this is a technical adjustment to language clarifying that the hub and spoke.
Only applies to the pilot.
Correct.
And that report was great.
So,
I read it. Yeah.
so we okay 61?
No, it's good, but it was short on outcomes. In other words, it's all around the money and best practice, but how do I know?
Outcomes.
How do I know what difference it made? And I didn't think the report,
Well, I'm meeting with them again and having them in, so that's one of the concerns that I share.
all right, well, then. Thank you for following up. Public health,
Okay, right.
I guess we're up to section 64 at this point. And so we had 300,000 for syringe exchange and we're more than, and we want 500,000 on top of the 300,000.
So,
And we have no,
We have testimony?
no, I don't know what the justification or what the demand is. And,
I have heard that, the money that we appropriated last year, which, the organizations that handing out the syringes, they haven't received that money yet, so, I think it probably would be good if you, took some testimony.
they haven't even received the 300?
I don't think they've received, the money that they expected, and we, I think we appropriated 400.
It says shall provide grants in the amount of 300 in general fund dollars and 500,000 in tobacco. I thought the 500,000 was in addition.
Yeah, that additional money hasn't gone in.
Why,
Oh, we haven't appropriated yet.
No, but I think we appropriated more money in the, general fund budget last winter. And the budget we passed had that in there, and that money hasn't gone on.
So what you're saying is the 300 hasn't gone out?
I'm not sure about, I'm not sure it has gone.
Some money somewhere hasn't gone, so.
Somebody's having a problem.
I thought it was.
Amy, would you send off an email? Probably, is Paul Daly still at the health department?
Yes.
All right, ask Paul if, the status of the 300,000 appropriation. But the question then becomes one, does anyone have any documentation? And this is a fairly significant increase, 500 up when you against 300. What is driving that need? And I'm not, and we'll just, it's an additional spending, we'll hold it for now. We'll find out if they've got the money out the door for what we already
I
appropriated.
think she should ask about the full picture around it. I think there was a federal grant that they expected to go out, that federal money, and that's why they held some of the money, the extra money that we appropriated last year. A whole picture would be good.
why would we take $500,000 of tobacco money?
Because they're available.
Well, there's a lot of places that we could spend that probably a lot better relating to tobacco
Well-
than we can on picking up syringes.
Well, this is a basic public health.
And we've been doing this a
AIDS
long time.
prevention. Yeah.
It's HIV
No.
AIDS.
It's just a very large increase against 300,000, and I don't know, did a request get made to
Legally
the,
uses.
Adam, can you
I don't
tell
think
us,
this
did the
was-
health department, indicate any request here?
I want.
That I know of, this wasn't our submission, so I don't know.
All right,
I don't know if you want them on YouTube.
so I'm gonna ask, Ginny, maybe you could, put that, I know you've got a lot on.
I'm gonna
your list.
reach out. I think.
And I
reaching
can
out-
see that we have somebody in back of you that will probably, but we need to have some kind of written explanation of that gives us some sense of what is behind the request, other than you know, I need 500,000. I'm sure there is that information, but I think for our purposes in making decisions, we need that. And that's a one-time, I gather. So we'll wait pending more information. Debt service. All right, so,
This was language to ensure that the fund transfers that happen in the bill from the general fund and transportation fund to the general obligation bonds debt service fund are one time. So the House Appropriations Committee wanted language to that clear.
okay. By doing that, it means that, in 26, you've got to find that 3.5 million. Unless you want it just as a matter of practice. And I'm gonna ask the commissioner, your plan was to have that ongoing as a transfer, as
That's
opposed to
correct.
a 1 year. Because the minute you make it one time, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, or you, in the sense that you're gonna have to replace the 3.5 million.
This was the 3.5 was what we got by not.
And then we, the statutory reserve, got reduced by 3.5 million. By counting it as, by moving it from an appropriation to a transfer. So if you're gonna do it, you're kind of crossing the Rubicon, I have a feeling.
Following best practices.
Oh, you're not crossing the Rubicon.
We're following GASB rules is what we're doing.
So, I mean,
Right,
let's be honest with ourselves. If we're gonna do it, it means that we are reducing our base appropriation to support debt service. I mean, and the statutory reserve. So, we can have more discussion, but I would say that, if we want to have some cautionary language, we had a communication from the treasurer saying 3.5 is not, you know, a de minimis. I love that.
Yeah.
But if it continued to be a practice, it would, you know, it would be, it's eroding the reserves. So that ties into the study. So the question is, do we want to be honest that this isn't one time once we've done this? Because I don't think our ability to probably plug the 3.5 is going to be any better in 26.
But of course, the question is 26 if you do with the house.
Right.
That's kind of what they wanted. They wanted, it's a kind of a way to have it both ways.
We can hold it and come back to it and try to just clean up as many as we can. But I did want to confirm my impression that once you make this from an appropriation to a transfer, you are basically making a base adjustment, and it's not a one-time event. Or if you make it a one-time event, then you've got to find 3.5 million more when you build the budget.
Yeah, because they crossed out at the tail end. That shall not reoccur in future fiscal years, so
I'm still there.
Yeah,
that's crossed out. isn't it?
no, that's there, that was an adjustment the committee made at a later point, so
It's highlighted for now.
it was highlighted to flag for House Appropriations that this further language change had been made.
But that highlighted part was made when the rest of subsection A is made.
Right.
There's no way
So,
of obligating future legislators.
I highlighted it to
I know.
flag for the House Appropriations Committee that had been added.
No, you're right, center lines, you're not obligating,
But this kind of forced the question because it would be one, otherwise it would just happen on that.
and you can argue it both ways, and I suppose the reserve study would help with that as well. Do people want to, make any decision on that at this point, or just?
Whatever the chair.
I do like having goals, but
So, you don't have the number.
We can.
All right, we'll keep moving right along.
Section 66, that's just a small correction to the governor recommend to make sure that the original dollar amounts reflected.
did you say page 66?
Section 66 on page 58.
Oh. Okay.
On page 61, so section 71 corresponds with section 58 of the governor recommend budget adjustment. So this is that agency of transportation e-incentive language that is on hold for now.
Yeah. Until we talk about it, and I will concur with the vice chair of transportation. What we do with that, okay?
On
Looking
page,
at what he said.
on page 63, section 73. Again, this is just a technical correction to the governor recommend.
73.
Yes, section 73.
To purchase. Well, this is changing, the governor's recommending that instead of the 40 to 45 seats, we purchase nursing stimulation.
The cross out is what the house is doing.
So the cross out was intended to be part of the governor recommend language. So what is in red here just reflects that the House made that correction.
But the House is adding to purchase nursing simulation,
No, the governor recommended that.
but they're agreeing,
Yes,
but they're deleting the
40.
40 to
Yes.
45 seats.
so the underlined additional language at the bottom of page 63 and the top of page 64 was both worked by the governor.
And the House concurred.
The House concurred. It was just that that additional language was inserted into the middle of a sentence. So the language preceding that, which is the strikeout language in red on page 63, needs to be struck out.
So can I ask, does that mean we're shifting from providing tuition support to providing simulation equipment?
Yeah, that's really what.
This was a request from the state university.
Understood.
I think they're just adding the available uses to it, but I don't think that the intention is to change it wholly. I think we're just making this.
Well, I think we really need to know, are we, by agreeing to this, substituting purchase of equipment for, training 40 nurses or?
Right, and I'm sure that part of the answer will be if they have the simulation equipment, they can bring in more people remotely maybe. But it would be good to know what the trade-off is in terms of number of seats,
Yeah.
because I doubt it's apples for apples. Yeah. But
And 45 nurses. Oh, and here's the thing. Down at, 64, has not seen growth in the long-term nursing care cohort. To utilize these funds.
But I would still like to know what their projected numbers are for the new pathway that they're. Because we had a projection under the old one, and if they're replacing it, it's
But agree, this note down here is from you or JFO, right? That you guys thought it was a technical correction?
So
Was that about something else?
that's about the strikeout language. So the language that's struck out on page 63, it should come from the administration as being struck out. So that's just a drafting correction.
Oh, but I think we're back to, do we really want to substitute the,
That's not,
seats for this
Right, so
simulation?
what is in red is a technical change to the policy change as recommended.
But if we don't, they would go with simulation, then I guess we need to get a little more information on that. So this should go back. And
Clinical placement.
yeah, well, you can read the explanation and it seems like, there's a rationale of why they're doing it, but And
It does say.
the increase, the availability of clinical experiences would allow the university to further serve students and increase program capacity. So I'm wondering if right now they don't have the take up and this frees up money to buy the simulation, which in turn would have the longer term benefit, but that's only conjecture on my part.
So
Center
they
line.
didn't have clinical placements for some of the students, and they couldn't increase the number of students because there were no clinical placements.
So that freed up the
This
money
is
to use.
probably remote access to clinical instruction. So it would allow for an increase. So I think that would be my, because we've been through this a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe we could just ask them to send
Yeah,
an email.
Yeah, because if that's true, then that's.
yeah.
That would make sense.
That.
Section 74 on page 65 mainly. So I just want to note for the committee that the language in this section came in the governor's recommend with amendments to more language in statute here. The House removed that, finding that other than the addition of language in sub A at the top of page 65, all of the governor's proposed amendments have actually already been made in statute through Act 47.
Act 47 are S
That's
100 last year.
Yes,
So you're adding the for each individual permit or permit application. Addresses the fact that it's.
Oh, so they're charging. Instead of, so is this coming from Natural Resources Board then, or the district commissions?
the Agency of Natural Resources suggested this language.
Oh, we did have a national resources.
Yes, that correction was made in Act 47. So the proposed language addition in sub A complements Act 47 amendments showing for the fees, therefore each individual permit or permit application.
So the publication goes forward and I'm the applicant and I need to pay for that. The requirement in statute currently is that the agency will publicize those permits. Is that right? Isn't the policy change? Did Natural Resources look at this? I don't know.
What's 165 for? To say an application fee.
Looks like a land use permit application.
This came from S1 from yours.
When you have your application, then there's publication of notice in the newspaper about those changes that are happening with Act 250. So,
I mean, just that what is underlined codifies longstanding practice by clarifying each application fee category may apply depending on project type.
So
I don't understand a word
I
of
don't
that.
understand that either. This is
So-
getting complicated.
Earlier
We need a
this,
tutorial, apparently, center lines. I think, shall we hold that and see if we can understand it a little better, or?
So 1, 2, and 3 here are addressing language that is no longer in the bill. So amendments to statute were all made in Act 47. So this section was originally a longer piece of language, making amendments that were duplicative of Act 47 amendments. The addition of the underlined text in sub A in this section would essentially be statutory cleanup to correspond with other statutory changes that have been made by Act 47. So in
Why
statute,
are we cleaning up Act 47 in the BAA?
so
I don't know, that's more of a rhetorical question. Did you propose this? Where did this come from? You didn't propose it. The House?
this came from the governor recommended budget adjustment.
Which one?
The budget
Yeah,
adjustment.
47 cleanup?
Yes, so, the Agency of Natural Resources, my understanding, was not aware that Act 47 had made statutory changes regarding this.
Oh, right, sorry, I thought you meant the appropriation. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Last week we had an ag, we had a guy come in that wants to build a bean grinding, mill, soybean and all that over in in Virginia's. Parking rides on one side of the road in the railroad station, just done. They made him, Act 250 made him do a traffic count to get his permit, $35,000. And they must have just done a traffic count when they did all that other stuff here. But, I mean, he said the permits are driving right up a wall, but.
They were expecting a lot of traffic to go to the bean to grind the mill.
But this has,
Tourist track.
I think we're struggling with this. We don't understand it. I guess we need to have somebody come and explain this to us. And I don't know who that somebody is. Is it Julie Moore? No.
EDC or Act 250, one of the two. I'll find the right person.
All right, thank you.
What's your time tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow or Friday. I mean, yeah. And this is just. Oh, and the end of the page, on section 75, it's just clarifying that the tax bills, accounting and revenue collection. Yeah, I think we do want revenue collection. And since that seems to be their biggest function, we like that. Okay, I'm gonna suggest at this point, we call it a day. I think people are kind of had it, and then we can work through the rest of the language, hopefully tomorrow. We already did a lot of the back end of the bill with the Vermont Strong Plains, which was met with popular acclaim.
So we're gonna stop.
So we're gonna stop at section 78, which starts on the top of page 50, which is the municipal equipment loan fund. Which is, I gather was who added, it's all in red, so that came in,
That is language that was recommended by the treasurer's office.
I assume that.
But when there's a change in red language, you made the change. Page 68.
So,
You probably just increased it for inflation. So
Yes, exactly
that's
right.
all it is. And I think they testified to that when they were, remember they were remote.
Yeah, didn't we do this in the EA? I mean, in the budget?
No, it's last year.
Yeah, or maybe I'm just remembering the testimony from this year.
I think you probably wrong. It was a while back.
It all merges together
Yeah.
after one.
I think that's probably, the only thing is,
yeah,
just updating it for inflation and then adding they shall put forth recommendations on a maximum of every 5 years.
right. So the idea would be to keep up with inflation. If this change were made this year, then the next time they want to change it or consider changing it for 2028.
Well, maybe we can close
There
that
you
out.
go, and right under the wire.
Well, let's
So
go.
we're gonna agree to move the 110 up to 150 for recognizing the inflation, because that probably hasn't been changed for a long time. And then add the additional, the treasurer shall recommend whether that counts.
Sounds good.
So we're ending up on Vermont Saves.
Okay.
And I think on that note, we'll let Brady, call it a day. and we will adjourn and, reconvene tomorrow, Thursday.